Hmm. Welcome, beloveds. Welcome to a moment of Mama mysticism. I am Astarius Miraculi, and today I'm here to talk with you about my beautiful mother and my life journey. We have Mother's Day coming up, and there's so many different variables of how we are in relationship with Mama. And I want to first and foremost take this opportunity to acknowledge my mama. My mother passed from this plane into spirit on November the 5th, 2016. And I was blessed with the opportunity to go back to Chicago. I was living in Atlanta at that time. Had to hurry back to Chicago and finalize her affairs and clear out her apartment and conduct her memorial ceremony all inside of a week. And one of the greatest blessings for me about my mama's passing was, at the moment of her passing, there was nothing but big love that existed between us. Big love. And it wasn't always that case. There were some very turbulent times, which I'm going to talk about a little bit later in this video. But at the moment of her passing, there was big love. And I was so honored to be the principal speaker at her memorial service, and also to hear different people share the amazing ways in which she had impacted their lives. And Mama had come a long way to get to that place. Mom was known as Elizabeth Childress when she passed on. However, she was born as Hart's Elizabeth Moore. And I'm so grateful for my mother, because she would receive my console after we got through all of the turbulent, difficult times, even times where I had hatred toward my mother, which I'll also share about that. But we were able to get through all of that and reach this amazing place of love. And my mama's nickname for me was Good Shepherd. She used to call me Shep for short. And Mama would say to me, "Shep, you are so wise. You should have been my daddy. I don't know how I got to be your mama. Shep, you should have been my daddy." And Mama used to say that, to me. And I just really appreciate and love and send all of my love and all of my benevolent heart to my mama on the other side, and encourage all of you to do the same thing. And I'm so grateful that I was able to get through those times that I had hateful energy toward my mother during those teenage years. And just a shout out for the importance of Mama and Daddy. We sometimes hold such issues. And I also acknowledge my father, who I never knew. I never met him in person. When Mama and Daddy came together, Mama was 18 and my father was, father was 35, Anyway, I never even knew him and never even knew of him until he'd actually passed on when I was maybe 8 years old or so. Thought my stepfather was my biological father for many, many years. So there was a lot of amazing things that I went through in my life. But one thing I encourage for all of us is to have great honor for our parents, because there's an amazing gift that Mama and Daddy gives us, and that is the gift of sponsoring us into incarnation, into embodiment. That's the greatest gift that we could possibly be given. Many, many people can participate in raising us, but only two can participate in sponsoring us into physical embodiment, and that's Mama and Daddy. And they are owed our respect, no matter how they behave during the rest of the time. And sometimes they behave horribly. And, there were some horrible things that I experienced with my mother, but she gave me the greatest gift that one could be given, and that's entry into this physical life. So we want to have love for mama, and we want to have love for daddy, no matter how they were or how they stumbled, what mistakes they made, or what unkindnesses they may have hurled against us. We want to love them anyway. Because what I have learned is if I have resentment, which I once upon a time did, toward my mother, then that resentment also becomes a resentment toward the office of motherhood. And then I block the returning current of nurturing. Hate mama and you will not be nurtured. Hate daddy and you will not receive the support that you're looking for. When you hate the drop, you hate the ocean. When you hate the drop, you hate every other drop, you see, and it also reflexes back to self. And so let us love our parents who sponsored our physical embodiment. So as a little child, I was a very psychic, clairvoyant child. I saw spirits, and I could describe departed ones in ways that my family knew that I was actually seeing what I said I was seeing. And they didn't have the presence of mind or spiritual understanding to teach me in the ways of my little mystic selfhood. And so when I would see these things, they became terrified of me seeing spirits and describing things that they knew were actualities. Eventually, their fear became superimposed upon me, and then I became afraid to see. And by the time I was 11, I shut down my first eye, because I was afraid to see inwardly, without having the proper training and guidance and so forth. And so, that shut down. But there was that innate spiritual something from the very beginning. My childhood was a very turbulent time emotionally. A lot of alcoholism in my family. My mother was alcoholic during my entire childhood. My aunts, my uncles, and the alcoholism was rampant. My stepfather, and I witnessed a lot of violence and a lot of fighting. Like my stepfather would jump on my mother, and then sometimes my stepfather, my mother, my aunt, my uncle, they'd all get together, and then they have a fourfold fight, all four of them fighting. And one of my aunts, her favorite thing was to take all of the dishes and break them. Every time she got mad, that was how she expressed her violence, is to break all the plates and break all the glasses. And so every other weekend or so, this is what I would witness, and it was very difficult, to see that, to bear witness to that. Now, I don't feel like a victim in that, because I know that at some level of my soul, I chose that particular path through which to learn and through which to grow. And so just, there would be times I would try to jump in the fight and stop my stepfather from beating up my mother. And, I never was too little to really effect that, and so it was just very difficult in that respect. And then, at age 11, mama and stepdaddy, they broke up, and that was the point, or got divorced. And that was the point at which mama said, well, he's not your biological father anyway. But at that time, a biological father had already passed on when I was somewhere around 8 years old, even though I never knew him. So, that was an interesting twist, as well. Mama was very strict. Mama used to say to me, I was an only child, and mama used to say, if I lose you, I won't have anybody. And mama used to say, nobody will ever love you like I love you. And of course, her being alcoholic, sometimes the way that she loved me was a bit twisted. So, there was a confusing, impression with regards to the experience of love. And of course, in her alcoholism, she was not able to really love me, in the most exalted way that a mother could love, a little son. So I remember in the neighborhood of 14 years old or something of that nature, mama was so strict. I always had to go in the house, like 1 hour earlier than most kids could go in, 1 hour earlier than the legal curfew there in Chicago. And I remember being embarrassed. I remember feeling a diminishing of my self-esteem because I didn't have the same privileges that most other children had. And I remember being so embarrassed about it, like I had a girlfriend, and I remember, she lived a 15-minute walk, from my house. And so every night I had to leave her house at 9:15, make sure I'm home by 9:30. And I was so ashamed that this is what my mama said I had to do. I told my girlfriend that I was on supervision with the police. And that's why I had to be in so early. And I didn't understand all of that then, but I realized it was a diminishing impact upon my self-esteem. I didn't feel like I had the same equality as my peers growing up at that particular time. And so, the pressure began to mount and mount and mount. And by the time I turned 16, I just sort of went nuts. And I did what it felt like was taking my power back. And I just wasn't going to obey the rules, anymore. And I was going to come in the house whenever I wanted to come in the house. And so at age 16, Mama and I sat down and decided that since I was not going to obey the rules, that it was best for me, to leave. And so I left Mama's house at age 16, and it took me a long time to learn how to take care of myself, for I don't know, maybe 2.5 to 3 years, I literally lived on the streets, and I didn't even realize that I was homeless. I just felt like, oh, I'm having a hard time, but some way, somehow I'm going to work it out. I also had too much false pride to even reach out to other relatives because I had a big family. My mama had 6 sisters. There was plenty of people I could have reached out to, but I didn't. And then I was growing up in this treacherous ghetto of Chicago, on the south side of Chicago, and all of my role models were pimps and hoes and gangsters and thieves and con men and con women and people dying of heroin overdoses, being found in the hallway, needles still in their arm, drive-by shootings with gangs, drive by in the car and just shoot into the crowd. And several of my friends were murdered on the corner, and they just happened to be those that weren't even involved in the gang. So, I mean, there was just a lot of treachery. To me at that particular time, it was just the natural thing because that was all that I knew. I just had to learn the ways of the street and how to survive. Sometimes I would sleep on the L train from one end of the line to the other, sitting up, on the L train, and sometimes sleeping in the gambling houses. And then at age 16, I had a job at the Whole House, on 47th Street in Chicago. I was the doorman. I was the one that would collect the money for the room, and then time them. They got 10 minutes. 10 minutes was up, I'd knock on the door. They had to come out. And so I'm hanging out in that environment of pimps and hoes and gangsters and thieves because I'm thinking that I want to be a part of that particular life. And for 6 years I was, from age 16 to 22, very turbulent, crazy, crazy time. In my life. And God was kind enough to take care of me and to get me through all of that. I mean, I could have been in the penitentiary. I could have been dead. I could have been murdered. I could have been many, many different things. And, many of my friends and people that I knew perished that way. But God had a plan for me. And I want you to know a little bit about my story to be able to see the ways in which I have been redeemed, what I had to come through to get to this Astarias Miraculi place that I am, in my life now, how I had to get from Eric Victor Moore, to, all of the craziness that I went through with that to this Astarias Miraculi place in my life. And so those 6 years of insanity, I call them. And then in my 21st year, or I guess, I will say that finally, when I turned 19, then I finally learned how to take care of myself, maintained an apartment from that point. I was still a dishonor student in the University of Life's other side of the fence, but I did, at least begin to come into a place of responsibility and maintained an apartment from that point on. And then when I turned 21, I met a woman and I fell in love with this woman. And I know I did want to mention that in those turbulent years, I grew to have this hatred toward my mother. I had a hatred toward my mother. I had a hatred toward, my son's mother. I became a father at age 16. She was pregnant when we were both 15. We were in big trouble. And at that time, I still had a softness of heart, you know, probably would have been willing to get married and all of that kind of thing. But what happened is we were in so much trouble that she got angry with me, like it was all on me. And she said, I don't love you anymore, and I don't want anything to do with you. And in fact, I have someone else in my life. And that was kind of like the thing where I just really went so dark. You know, and I began to have this hatred toward women, and I had this hatred toward my mother. And, you know, the unfortunate thing around that is that that's just a hatred toward my own self. And, you know, I say, you know, my heart is so tender for the women and the goddesses. And, you know, I'm so grateful that I was able to get beyond that and come into a place of love and honor, you know, for womanhood. And I say thank you to my mother for everything that she was, because even when she would whip me mercilessly, because my whippings were very intense, you know, that was what I ordered up into being. I needed to learn and grow through that exact experience. And that's why I chose my mom. Okay, so again, 21 years old, fell in love with a woman. It began to slow me down. It was God's plan to bring me from all of that treachery into a place of universal love. The relationship lasted for about 9 months, and my heart just cracked. My heart broke open. And I found myself with this amazing universal love, you know, for all people, right when I turned 22. You know, and, you know, I just stepped onto my spiritual path and, you know, just stepped on so powerfully and passionately. And, you know, insights began to open, and I found myself with this amazing love. And it was hard to even understand the hatred and the treachery, you know, that I had been engaged in. And yet at the same time, you know, I feel grateful for all of the painful issues that I went through, because I feel that those things have shaped me and helped me to become the person that I am now. And also to help me have compassion for people that are still struggling, you know, in those, you know, types of experiences in life, you know. So then for a while, I drove a taxi in Chicago, and I started writing my poetry and discovered that I had this amazing gift to convey messages that were very transformational through poetry. So I was driving this taxi, and then I had published my poems on poster, which I had posted all over the taxi. And so I would sell my poems in the taxi, and, you know, it was like this amazing thing, because I had curtains and lights. And I mean, it was like the interior decoration of the inside of this cab was out of this world. People got in and they just didn't even want to leave, because I just had this, you know, way about me that everything had to be unique. It had to be different, you know. And so for, you know, a few years, I drove that, you know, and, you know, I sold my poems, you know, in the cab. And then I began to decided I wanted to write 12 poems on astrology, you know, on each one of the astrological signs. And that was a really great venture. And before I could finish that process of writing the 12, which was a 6-month process, I was catapulted into a full-scale study of astrology. And before I completed the process of those poems, I did my first professional astrological reading. So then that began my journey of astrology, which was just an amazing journey, you know, journey through that, you know, learn things about pranayama and yoga and conveying healing energy through breathing and that kind of thing, you know. And then the didgeridoo, you know, comes in, and I learned the resonance of healing vibration through sound, the didgeridoo and vocal harmonics and all of that kind of thing. And so it's just a little snapshot, you know, of my journey. And the biggest piece of all is I just absolutely love and thank my mama for being the vessel, my mama and my daddy, for being the vessel through whom I could be born into this physical life. You know, and even my father, who I never knew, James Foster, I love you, and I thank you so much for sponsoring my embodiment. And I understand that you were not meant to be a physical part of my life, and I'm good with that. And I wish you well on the other side, unless, of course, you've been reincarnated back here. But wherever you are, I wish you well, and I wish you love. And Mama, I love you so much. And and thank you for all that you were, in my life. And I thank you, Mama, for allowing me to be the catalyst for you to stop drinking. Because I remember, I had been at the end of my rope. I've been through so much with Mama. I've been through having Mama committed, to the mental, institution, and being present for that, and holding space for her in that, and her being evicted onto the streets. And as they were putting her stuff on the streets, I put it in a truck and took her to my house, and she stayed with me for a while with my wife at that time. And then the last straw was my aunt called me and said, your mama was found with a rope and said she was going to hang herself. And that was the last straw for me. And I said, Mama, I love you so much, but I'm not going to hang around and watch you do what you're doing anymore. You're going to go get some help. I'm done with you. And I wasn't joking. I had as much as I could go through with my mama, and it really impacted her. That woman went to AA the following day and never took a drink for 40 years. And I got a chance to hear from all of her AA members what an amazing impact she had made in so many people's lives. And I love my mama because she would let me do readings for her. She would allow me to counsel her. I initiated her into Reiki. And this is an unusual thing with parents. Some parents feel like, you're my kid. I brought you in the world. You don't have nothing valuable for me. But my mama would receive my counsel. And I feel so honored and blessed by the fact that she would do that. And our biological mother is an access code to the universal mother, to Mother God. And that what you feel about your biological mother is that what you feel about, the Mother God aspect. You see, and so it's a trap to have bitterness toward Mama. It's a trap to have bitterness towards any of our parents, whether it be father or mother or any other being. Let us be of a forgiving heart, because if we don't forgive the past, we can't trust the present, and we then attract a future untrustworthy and unpleasant. And it is wise not to despise it. Use the dung to fertilize it, for life's greatest connoisseur gets the best crops from the best manure. So I thank all of you, beloveds, who are kind enough to bear witness to my posts and my videos, and to allow me to humbly be a catalyst for your growth and your transformation. I don't take it lightly, that you are open and receptive to my offerings. Thank you so much for that. I'm holding you very close to my heart, and in my prayers, for the absolute betterment of your life. These are very emotionally turbulent times that we're living in. And so anything that can facilitate the healing process and that can facilitate growth is really important. And that's why I wanted to share a little bit of my life story, and also about my beautiful mother, and may you have that same feeling about your beautiful mother and your beautiful father. And that we, during this experience of Mother's Day, have the greatest blessing that we could possibly have. For part of Mother's Day, the moon is in Aries, and moon in Aries is a sign that represents selfhood. And so it's about learning how to be self-mothering, how to be self-nurturing, and how to be open and receptive to allowing all of the nurturing energies to come. But we have to be receptive to that. And then, for part of the day of Mother's Day, the moon is in Taurus, which relates to values and valuables. So it's a time when we're really meant to place a higher value, on mother, which is moon, but also it's family. If you're a woman, it's the way that you express your womanhood. If you're a man, it's the way that you interact, with female energy. So let's walk each other home. Let's be forgiving. Again, sacred apologies for all of the unkindnesses to women, from men. I take responsibility for all of my brothers. I'm interconnected with every man. Every man is interconnected with me, but we're all interconnected with each other. I have learned that the inner feminine side of my being is invisible to physical sight. You see, therefore, that's my access code to all of the mysteries, all of the things of spirit, my access code to heaven. For a woman, you can see a woman's, womanhood in the physical sense. Her male essence is invisible to physical sight. That's a woman's access code to spirit and to the mysteries and to heaven. The opposite gender self is the way back home. So if we hold issues toward the opposite gender, we're waging war on our own self by extension and barring our re-entry into the ascended realms of heaven. So we're in it together, whether we like it or not. Anyway, beloved, I know that's a big mouthful, a big chunk, and I mean, it's only a snapshot. There's so much about my life, but at least I was able to share a little bit of it, and for you to bear witness for me acknowledging and loving and honoring my mother and my father. My access through my website is astarius.com, ASTARIUS.com. There's a lot of services that I offer. I'm not even going to go into the particulars of that, but you can visit my website to discover those things. That's astarius.com, ASTARIUS.com. Aho, Ashe, Amen, Namaste, Hotep, and Lakesh, Alakin, Shalom, Satnam, Hariom. Our sacred juices are cooked in infinitely expanding Juicetafari, Rastafari, Blistafari. May we always have many miles on our smile, wiggle in our giggle, tingling in our boots, laughter ever after, put in our strut, wings on our butt, always rising up at the top. There's room for all. It's just the bottom that's crowded, y'all. And so it is, and so it shall eternally be. Namaste.